Dead to Rights wasn't the most fascinating or enthralling game ever made, but it had plenty of redeeming qualities to it, and that squared it away in the sort of so bad it's kind of good category. Unfortunately, Namco took zero notes on what worked for Jack Slate and pissed out a sequel that took everything good from the first game and just tossed it out the window, while polishing the gameplay and combat a little bit and hoping that that would be enough for this game to stand on. Spoilers, it really wasn't. In 2005, we got Dead to Rights 2, Too Dead, Too Furious. It's kind of impressive how bland that this game turned out to be when they had some solid material to work with. Jack Slate was a hard-boiled noir detective with charming quips and one-liners. He had a cool dog that would rip out bad guys' carotid arteries at a simple command. There was a cool slow-motion dive move that you can do while shooting your weapons, and there were even some decent mini-games to be had, brutal disarm animations, and varied mission structures to drive the whole thing home. The sequel somehow incorporated most of these things, and while at first glance this game looks like it was rushed out in less than a year to keep the Dead to Rights name relevant, but this game came out 3 years after the first game, and it still feels underdeveloped. But perhaps the most egregious mistake Namco made was to try to make Jack into something that he was never meant to be. Cool. The game opens with a cinematic much like the first game, although this one plays up on Jack being a nonchalant badass or something, casually stopping an armed robbery at the corner store on his way to pick up a six-pack. Honestly, it's a cool animation, but it just doesn't properly set you up for the actual game that lies ahead. The story of this game functions as a prequel to the first game. Logically, I think that makes sense since Jack killed nearly everyone in power in the first game. To kick the game off, Jack gets assigned to the case of a kidnapped judge and family friend named Alfred MacGuffin, who had uncovered a crime syndicate in the city and has files on the corrupt individuals in power. The MacGuffin files, if you will. MacGuffin, of course, being the term to describe a plot device that drives the story forward while also having very little importance in itself. The name choice is, of course, an on-the-nose reference to this, by also having the first name being Alfred, after Alfred Hitchcock, the director who popularized the term in the 1930s. Anyway, MacGuffin gets judge-napped and Jack Slate is on the prowl, starting off the same way he did the last game, by driving his car right through the front door of the first mission. Kind of a self-aware joke in this game. I think every level starts with him smashing through the front door with a vehicle. Really, the whole story is just a slap-together homage to the first game. You even start the game going after a slime bag who runs the local strip club similar to Augie Blatz. You go on from level to level, taking down anyone who stands in your way, from low-level car thieves, a biker gang, and Chinese triads, and all the way up to the Russian mafia. But, as Jack says,
"Mafia, triads, they all take the same bullets."
Testosterone much?
Before we go forward, I just want to shout out all you guys for supporting this channel. Now that I'm home, I am trying to focus on putting out more content more regularly, including some shorts and streaming over on Twitch. And I really want to hit 100k subscribers, and I'm striving to get there. My goal by the end of the year is 90,000, so I'm hoping to reach that with some more frequent uploads. So subscribe if you haven't. Also, for those that financially support the channel, you're just unreal. I appreciate it so much. All those on Patreon and members on YouTube, and those who purchase anything from my new storefront that I'm still tweaking changes around with here and there. For those who have already ordered from the website, thank you so much. I just want to say thank you guys. Quick shout out. Back to the video. Let's go ahead and get into the gameplay of Dead to Rights 2. As tempting as it is to copy and paste my gameplay overview from the first video, there are a few differences, and I'm sad to say most of them are for the worst. Overall, it's the same run and gun style gameplay with lock-on targeted shooting. You get the option to dive around and multi-target enemies, although this time you can look all the way around you when diving now. Before you were locked into one line of sight during the dive, but this game has you able to look around 360 degrees while free falling to the pavement. Disarms make a welcome return, with several different animations being implemented for each different weapon type, and they're just as pleasing to perform as in the first title. You can also grab a poor enemy and use him as a meat shield for the hundreds of bullets flying your way. There are some throwable weapons now in addition to the simple exploding canisters that Jack loves to toss into the fray and shoot for a satisfying explosion. And there are environmental things that you can shoot as well to clear out a bunch of bad guys, like vehicles and the typical video game red barrel. Shadow is back again, but he's almost as disappointing to use as he was in the first game. Just a single attack and weapon retrieval. No fancy animations or different use cases for him. I think the only difference is the fact that you can see him running around you all the time now in real-time gameplay and are able to use him a little bit more often, so he's a little bit more than just a free kill button that spawns out of thin air, but really not much. Actually, they take away moments where you can control Shadow altogether. He's even more of a backseat character this go around. In fact, they took away all the variations in gameplay and minigames.
Didn't have time for minigames.
Now, I'm not saying that I miss the polygon ass cheeks or Operation Bomb defusals, but it seems kind of weird to take away something that was such a big part in the first game and not adding anything else to break up the monotony of running and gunning for 8 straight missions. I think shooter games have a tough time when it comes to implementing gameplay styles because you are a shooter game. You're assuming that your audience wants to shoot people. But when it's just non-stop waves and waves of enemies every level with no rest, it gets very boring very quickly. And it makes you realize just how much the mini games, the longer sequences of fist fighting, and the interesting boss fights broke up the pace of the gunplay in the first game. This game has no mini games. The fist fighting sections are a fraction of the time in each level, and the boss fights are just bullet sponge shootouts with respawning minions to gun down until the main baddie is dead. The boss fights are just terrible. You can't even focus down the boss and try to kill him to ignore all the underlings flooding in, as the health bar is broken into sections, and once you drain 1 or 2 of them, you have to wait a little bit before you can damage the fucker again. Who thought that was a good idea? This biker dude with sideburns and shark teeth needs 1,500 rounds to put him down? Ridiculous.
What do you think about them apples, huh, boy?
It is kind of weird to use the things that seemed the most out of place in the first game as a comparison, like the chopper shootouts, the weird mini games, and choking out the mayor of the city, but I think this is a strong case of you don't know what you got until it's gone, and when it's gone, it's just stale gunplay. I think in the first level of the game, you probably kill over 50 dudes. 50 guys in a nightclub. That's gotta be a violation of the fire code or something, but at the very least, it's a violation of engaging gameplay. I think the most non-combat thing that you do is hit switches and interact with keycards and stuff, and the game really tried to make Jack look as cool as possible doing this. Either that or they couldn't animate him picking up a keycard off a desk, so you know what we're gonna do? Have him slam his hand down into the table and then have the card slow motion flip into the air just for him to grab it. Yeah, that's cool. That's what the kids want. The whole game is just a fever dream of killing enemies in an area, then turning a corner to let more spawn in, and then turning another 90 degrees and, you guessed it, more enemies. The same type of enemies, the same type of shooting, and it makes it worse that these areas that the game takes you to are just kind of nonsensical. At least in the first game, the levels are all incorporated with each other. You start at the construction sites, and then you end up in jail, and then the gold refinery, and then once you break out, you find that all these places are linked through underground tunnels, and they all serve a purpose. This game just has you going to an ice rink or a biker bar or a triad temple with no rhyme or reason, just to have the climax take place in a casino hotel or something. It's just lazy. Some of the environments were done pretty well for a PS2 era game, but most of them were just like brick walls and boxes and shipping containers, like just generic asset flips. So it's pretty clear that the gameplay is not holding up very well compared to the first game. I mean, some things are an improvement, the guns feel a little bit easier to use, and the fist fighting is generally better, but overall it is a deduction from the first game. But let's see how the writing and the plot to this game holds up.
You're gonna be a superstar at Iron Point unless you talk. Ow, fuck!
Like I said before, the plot of this game functions as a prequel to the first game, and it's overall incredibly similar in a lot of ways. The game opens with Jack and Shadow getting ready in his office at the precinct. He goes over how Judge MacGuffin had announced that he has some files on the corrupted elite in Grant City, and he was ready to go public with this information. This revelation, however, led him to just getting kidnapped by all those that he was going to reveal. Jack makes a quip about how the chief of police, Hennessy, didn't want him on the case, probably hinting at Hennessy already being one of the corrupted elites in the files, but since MacGuffin is a family friend to Jack, he is going to hunt down his abductors anyway. Jack gets a call from his girlfriend Ruby, who he sent to do some undercover ops at the local strip club in order to get a lead on who took the judge, and she gives him the name of Grant City's porn king Hector Cruz. So it takes no time for Jack to drive his cruiser right through the front door of the Blue Fly dance club.
Valet parking my ass!
After shooting his way through dozens of armed men in the club, he runs into Hector out back of the establishment and does some hands-on questioning for some more intel. Hector points him in the direction of the abandoned ice rink, now home to a gang of car thieves called the Scorpions. He says that they took the judge there to keep him somewhere off the grid, so Jack, on his way to the second location, of course arrives by slamming his car into one of the stolen cars at the ice rink, crushing a poor guy in the process. After dispatching all the Scorpions, he comes across the van that they used to kidnap the judge, but no judge. He fortunately decided to keep one of these gang leaders alive for some information, chaining him upside down in the garage and threatening to burn him with gasoline. This guy talks pretty quick though, and sends Jack in the direction of some biker gang called the Death Riders that hangs out at a bar called the South Star, arriving there by crashing into a line of bikes parked outside.
My bike!
It is here that Jack eventually finds Judge MacGuffin, alive and well. Well, just long enough for him to spit out a single line of dialogue before he gets shot in the head. The leader of the Death Riders, named Houston, shot and killed the judge and very arrogantly claims to have the files and there's nothing that Jack can do about it. But after some taunting, using Houston as a dartboard, he tells Jack that the files are locked up in an old church downtown. This is the first place that Jack shows up that he properly parks his vehicle at the start of the mission, but I bet it's only because his girl Ruby is riding on the back of the bike. But that doesn't stop him from busting through the front door like an Avengers level threat.
Who the fuck is there? Land Shark. I'm Jack Slate, bitch.
Don't you know who I am? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
After clearing out the area, Jack and Ruby move in to crack the safe that holds these files. Jack holds off more enemies while Ruby does the safe cracking, but soon they get it open and they find not all of the files, but there is some information on the Black Dragon Triad, so at the very least, Jack has his next lead. And back to the status quo, Jack rams the front gate of this temple that these guys are holed up in with a box truck. There isn't much chatting to be had here. Jack lays out countless Triads members before taking on the leader named Hong Se. After gunning him down, Jack holds Hong over the ledge of the temple and tries to get some more intel, but all he gets is that there's something going on at the docks tonight.
Oh, the docks! There's something going down on the docks tonight!
Thanks. Oh, remember when I promised to kill you last? I lied.
And while there is no animation showing that Jack drove into the docks warehouse to start this mission, there is clearly evidence left behind to show that he in fact did. Anyway, there is of course a bunch of baddies here to put down, and this is one of the more long and drawn out levels in the game that has tons of enemies around every corner, going from the docks to a ship to various warehouses and industrial buildings, all before seeing the leader of the Russian mob, Bob Blanchov, pull up in a limo outside. Jack gets the drop on him, but unfortunately Blanchov was one step ahead and kidnapped Ruby in order to make Jack disarm himself. His goons take Jack over to the pier in order to execute him, but Shadow, yeah, you know, that dog that's kind of forgotten about until now, he noms on the bad guys and gives Jack the escape that he needs to chase down Blanchov. But he's too late. Ruby gets shoved in the car and they head off. But Ruby has some kind words of advice for her boo thing.
Shoot the fucking bad guys next time, okay?
After this rendezvous at the docks, Jack said that he was called in for violent behavior by the chief of police, Hennessy. And this makes Jack stop and think if Hennessy is in fact in on these corrupt plays happening in the city. Obviously, since this is a prequel, we know that is exactly what is going on. Still, Jack moves on to Blanchov's penthouse to take him face on, and he's greeted with a chopper on the rooftop to make for another aggravating level to get through. He guns down half the population of Estonia and then goes through all the gaudy decorated rooms in the penthouse before finding Blanchov and Ruby. Jack Slate tries to be tough since he has the upper edge, but he really should have listened to Ruby's advice in the limo.
Game over, Blanchov.
Your friend was right, Mr. Slate. Always shoot the fucking bad guy first. No! Ruby!
Ruby dies in Jack's arms, and he's ready to put Blanchov 6 feet under. He chases Blanchov out onto the roof, but unfortunately that pesky chopper was there to sweep him away. And conveniently, another one is primed and ready to swoop in to shoot at Jack. A whole army of people and an air force just to take down one detective and his dog. But since Jack is in his badass stage, this still isn't enough.
As I destroyed another useless object, it hit me. She was right. Always shoot the fucking bad guys first.
Blanchoff is celebrating his win, thinking that Jack Slate is dead and saying that he sold the MacGuffin files to his friend. He doesn't really name the friend, but it's likely Hennessy or maybe even Pinnacle before he takes power and becomes mayor. His celebration is cut short by a pissed off Jack busting into their compound though. They thought that their security was high enough, but they clearly don't know that Jack can and will drive through every door and wall that he needs to get somewhere. This place is like a hotel and casino. It's by far one of the most frustrating levels, just due to the sheer amount of enemies and rooms to clear, but thankfully the boss fight at the end is as simple and as straightforward as the rest of them. And all things considered, I definitely prefer this one over the helicopter fight. The only bad part about it is this probably is the most unsatisfying ending that I've ever played in a game. Jack has been doing all these badass monologues all game, and when it comes to taking down the leader of the Russian mob, the guy who killed his girlfriend in cold blood, he just says bye bye and shoots him once in the chest.
Bye bye.
No.
And then recaps on just how unsatisfying this whole thing is. Jack lost the judge, he lost his girl, and he lost the files. He went through the whole game and fought thousands of unnamed thugs just to come out with less than he started with. At the very least, he killed some of the corrupt gangs in the city. The Russian mob, the Death Riders, the Scorpions, the Black Dragon Triads, but in a city like Grant City, there is always going to be new villains ready to swoop in and take the power, which I guess is why the first game still has so many corrupt individuals to take out.
They got what they wanted. I ended up with nothing. They had me dead to rights.
I also want to note at the end that is not the right way to use the phrase dead to rights. What the fuck is that? You'd think for a series of games named after this phrase, they would at least know what the phrase means. The story to this game wasn't as bad as I initially thought it was going to be. I think it's a pretty well done prequel to the first title, and they even kept some goofy and campy charm in the writing that I appreciated. I think the spot they went wrong with was trying to make Jack this burnt out and broken man. In the first game he was more quirky and charming, and this game is making him out to be kind of a broken soul, but I guess I can see it going either way. He was kind of a blunt and emotionless man in the first game, but the awkwardness came off as funny rather than bleak, like when he told Hildy that his dad was dead for the first time.
Yeah, don't worry about it. He's already dead.
What?
I wish as a prequel it would have shown more character background growth rather than the formation of the citywide corruption of Grant City. Show Jack as a beat cop before he was a detective, or how he got Shadow in the first place, or incorporate his father into the story somehow since we only know him as a corpse from the first game. I think they dropped the ball in a lot of points when writing this story, but for what they did, it wasn't that bad. In the end though, the story isn't a super big deal. It did well for what it needed, but the big problem this game had was that it fell so flat in the gameplay department. It took some cool things from the first game like diving, disarming, and shielding, but completely stripped away any kind of gameplay that wasn't combat. And the combat just wasn't good enough to prop the whole game up on one gameplay element. I truly don't know why they took away the minigames or the shadow controlled missions or even any interesting boss fights just to not replace them with anything else. This game is just shooting and shooting and shooting, maybe a punch or two and then some more shooting, and it's just straight up not a good time. It's also insanely difficult. I lowered the settings down to easy after the first mission, and I still died an insane amount of times. So far, this series of games hasn't been holding up really well to my nostalgia glasses. I plan to give Dead to Rights one more chance with the title released on the next generation of consoles, and I hope that it doesn't keep with the trend of making this series' quality stay on a downward slope. With that being said though, I do want to shout out my homies on the Patreon and the YouTube memberships for holding it down. Doc Schwinn, Kid Kingpin, Zachary Parkerson, Snowflake, Anonymous Starkweather, Crash Bandicoot 25, Grand Taquito, Ben Stevens, Potty, Yay Man, Marshall Duff, Alfred Correa, Scribe Slendy, Matthew Taylor, Nick the Brosa, Kenneth Butler, Grizzly Wizzly, Sexy Pickles, Sick Kitty is Dead, and Forge'em Nas. As always, thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time. Peace.